Well, good morning and welcome back. This is Tony Visco. I'm going to be your host today for another Painting for Pleasure session. And today what we're going to do is we're going to do the beach at Provincetown. The reason I chose this is because I want to get everybody to understand how to create distance. And especially dealing with something that's as flat as sand going from the foreground back to this area back here where the water is. This is all light, and in order to create that, we need to create in order to create distance, we need to actually go and do something very special and create a little bit of a flow of dark to light to go back in or light to dark, as this case may be. The background here will help. In other words, that I built this. This is not actually a shot. I just put it together. But I've got little people on the beach, and we have the shore back there in P-Town, and it's pretty exact. It's just that what I wanted to do is I wanted to include some shoreline so that you could get a feel for it. And what we want to do is we want to go back in distance. Now, my horizon line, standing here looking out, is up here in this area. So what we're doing is we're skirting, looking down on the beach as it goes out. So, okay, so let's get started, and we have to look at how do we do this? How do we handle this? The first thing we need to do is we need to put in a horizon line. And we're going to do that now. Please keep in mind at all times that we're not dealing with copying a painting. We're dealing with copying our reference material. We're using our reference material as a guide. But the guide needs to be fairly accurate. So if we take a look at how this is structured, if you look at this 1, 2, 3, 4, we're basically 1, 2, 3. This beach line is about a third of the way down right here. Okay, so we can rough that in by just 1, 2, 3. So it's about right here. So we can say, okay, roughly our shoreline where the water is going to be is somewhere in this vicinity. And a light line goes across here. So we can do the same thing with taking a look at how this is structured. If we take a look at the sky at the shore, or at the area where at the edge of the water where this line comes in here, that's basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about a fifth of the way down. So if we measure that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll open it up a little bit more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. So roughly, we're talking about somewhere in this area, about right here, where we're going to come around with our distant shore, Provincetown in a distance. Okay. So it's roughly going to be there. So the idea is that this is going to be water. Somewhere in here, we're going to have sandbars. This is all going to be a sandbar. And the same thing is going to happen over here, where we have our tower in this area here, roughly. The hill's coming down. We're coming over, we got a water tank that's sitting over here. Some trees, what have you. We've got some stuff over here, like churches and buildings and all kinds of good stuff that's going on here. And in the same way as you come around. So we're just roughing this in. Okay, back here. And this is actually even taller. This thing is going to go up somewhere up in here. Okay, and this is a lot shorter. have to start to look at proportion. But I just wanted to rough it in just to give you a rough idea as to where it's at. This is all going to be water, and we're going to have people on the beach, and we'll put those little figures in here and there, and all I'm doing is just indicating spacing. So the sand, we're going to leave essentially all the sand, we're going to leave white for now, or light. We'll leave it on the light side, but we need to put in all of that warmth. So it's a yellowish, reddish kind of sand, if you look at the picture. So what we need to do is to sort of take a look at our value study. This will give you an idea. This is our value study as to how to really handle this. Okay, that's pretty thin right there, and what I want to do is just again to come back here and just indicate this here. This is going to all be dark in this area here. A lot of this stuff is going to be dark based on our value study. It's harder to see. That's actually much harder to see with the color, because the color is playing into this. But so I just forced the issue by just doing a value study, and then we'll put that value study in. So now I got rough lines in here, and some of the stuff I have is a little bit bigger than it should be, and some of it's a little smaller, but those are just lines of indication as to where I'm going to approximately put everything. If I start to go back in and I start to erase a lot of this stuff, I'm going to end up having a problem, because it's going to destroy the integrity of the paper. So in terms of how we're going to handle this thing, we're going to put in our sky first, and we're going to go from, and I'm going to paint over actually a lot of this stuff, but I'm going to put the sky in, and I'm going to go from a light blue to a light yellow as I come down here. So what we're really doing is we're going to do a graded wash, right? From a light blue to a light yellow, but it's going to grade, and it's going to grade from light down in this area. It's going to be a little bit darker, and then light again. So if we're going to do a graded wash, we need to determine how that graded wash is going to be done. And what we want to do is wet the paper first. So let's just take some water and just wet the paper. We're going to soften this up, wet it all the way down. And I have a situation here where I have just one hinged. The paper is hinged to the board from at the top. But the idea behind this is that we want to use a graded wash to start our piece. And now I chose this simply, again, because it's very important that we understand how to achieve this gradation, this ability to go back in space, which is extremely important. What I'm doing is I'm drying the edges to try to keep the water from, it's already starting, but to try to keep the water from backfilling over here. And I'm just sort of drying that edge out a little bit. We'll end up taping that pretty soon, or bring it in a little bit more. But essentially, we'll wet the paper nice and make it nice and saturated. Right, and this is where we're going to start to look at getting this nice and wet and soaking it, and then allowing paint to flow in to that area. So let's just take our number one flat brush, and that's what I'm working with. You can work with a round brush as well, big mop brush if you'd like. You can work with something like this. I'm sorry, like that. But I'm going to work with this one here. And I'm going to mix. Now I'm going to just take, and I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to take my light blue. So we'll start with cerulean blue as my wash, and I'm going to add a little bit of cobalt blue to it, and I'm going to make it a little bit wetter because I want to keep it light. I don't want a lot of pigment necessarily in this right now. A lot of water coming up here to the light sky, going right over everything. And I'm going to come down with some yellow ochre at the bottom. And I'm going to take yellow ochre with a little bit of my pyro red mixture in here, so it's sandy colored. And I'm going to work myself up. A little bit of yellow ochre, a little bit of pyro red, and you're going to see me go and work this so that it goes up into the blue area. That pyro red is cool with the mixture. But I want to go back again. I want to go back in space. So what I'm doing is sort of forcing the issue by going a little bit darker down here to light to dark again. So at this stage, one of the things that we can consider here is where we want our real lights, and we're going to have to pull those out by using just clear water. And if I look at my photograph, there are a little bit of white highlights here and there where the water is, so we're going to maybe just lighten this up a little bit, just clear water. And this is water into water, so there shouldn't be any situation where we're going to run into a problem with backfill or blossoms, because this is wet, the paper's wet, the pigment is wet, the brush is wet. I'm putting wet water into a wet paper, therefore we should not, when we do that, get or have any problems with regard to blossoms. Blossoms are going to occur from time to time, but blossoms will only occur if I'm taking wet water into a damp paper, not a wet paper. So that's going to be basically a highlighted area because that's the water tower. I'm going to just take and pull a little bit of light out that's going to be my highlight for probably my tower out there, and a little bit of highlight there for the church, and maybe some other structures out there. And I'm going to lift the colors. I'm going to lift the pigment up. Okay? Understandably, we're going to lift it all up. So I'm taking this little brush that I have right here, this little angular brush, and just going to drop hints of lights and darks over here in this area. Maybe we got a series of buildings that are over here that are lighter. Maybe we have a little bit of a watery thing going on right here with a little bit of water, and taking just a little bit of water in here. And just understand that when you put water into water, again, you should not get there shouldn't be any problems with backwash. Backwash being a blossom or a flower or whatever. Usually that happens a lot of times when and when you put that in, you'll actually see what ends up happening. It'll start to define a hard line around that area of wetness that you put in. So I want to create a little bit more lightness in certain areas, so I'm just taking water. This is my overall sandy tone. Taking some water and putting it in here. and lightening up certain areas. Maybe it's going to be a little bit lighter over here as we come down into this area. A little bit of water. And what I did is I'm creating sort of an arc, okay? I suppose you could probably try to do this straight, but I think that if we have a little bit of an arc, it tends to get a better feel for this. So just lightening up certain areas here. Again, it's sand. And we want it to dry like sand. A little bit of sand at the edge of that water. But nice light sand over there, so it gives you a feeling of going back. And we also have debris on the sand. People are walking in the sand, for instance. So we could actually, you know, I mean, the fact is that usually there's a lot of footprints that are basically in the sandy area, and we can just sort of put those in by doing some of this. Maybe that's a little bit too dark. A little bit of light area. Some of this is... I'm doing this while this is wet. This is not... I'm not trying to actually do anything other than to just give you this sort of gradual gradation here. So this area back here is a bit darker as we come near that water. And I'm using actually a combination of my yellow ochre, my cerulean blue, and my pyro red to create a lot of this stuff. Now what I'm going to do here is just feather this a bit to give you the impression of the overall illusion, I guess, of a sandy shore. P-Town, Provincetown is all sand. I mean, when the tide goes out, my God, there's no water. It's just amazing. I mean, there's just nothing but a big sandbar out there. Okay. And we have the same thing happening throughout this area right here. So we're going to do the same thing. We're just putting light strokes in here. Just light strokes. And the same thing that's going to happen along the shore, way out here, right? So some of it is going to be sandy. Some of it is going to be a little bit darker. That is to say, more water in this area here. And just indicating water here and there. Nice and soft. Just a hair more pigment is what I'm actually doing to create that water. We got some nice watered area here. Now I don't know why. I'm just sort of playing around with this thin brush. We could do this with a thick brush as well. All right, so just giving us a little bit of where the water is going to be out there. That's an example. We don't want to get too controlled. The problem is that if we get too controlled, that is to say, if we start controlling with such a small brush, you don't get the spontaneity of what happens. So let's go back to this big brush here and just drop in some of these. There you go. All right, and then we can go back with that dark area. We can go back and we can actually lift out some color too. Make it. I'm going to end up right now. I just put in water, and what's going to end up happening, because this is dried a little bit more, I'm going to end up getting a little bit of a blossomed area, which hopefully it'll work for me, because I'm trying to create a certain effect back there. And again, now I'm taking this and I'm just lightly touching this. I'm not putting a lot of pressure on it, and I'm not doing a lot of work to get that in. I just want a little bit of a light pressure on there. So how do we achieve that sort of those dots that are, I mean, like people are walking on the beach and stuff like that? You know, maybe we do it like this. We need some darks and lights, so I'm just saying that perhaps maybe if we look at this, we want to get a little bit of a brownish . Let's see what happens. Get some blossoms. It's dirt. It's a little bit darker. Feather some of this out. A little curve. Here again, we're trying to go back in space. We want to create that illusion that. So, if I want to lift some water, I want to make some of this a little bit lighter out here. So it looks like a little bit of lighter there, and maybe come in here with a little bit of lightness, and come across here with a little bit of light area. Water, clear water. Okay, lifting that value right out of there. Got some highlights over here as well. I'm dusting this, is actually what I'm doing. This is the hairs of the brush are just softly touching with no pressure, very little pressure. Now that can be done with that brush. It can actually be done with, you can take a fan brush and do the same thing. Alright, just dust it a little bit. This is a dry brush effect, just dusting over some of this stuff. What I'm trying to do is just create the softness of that. Or you can use a hacky brush too. That's always a possibility. You can take a brush like this, which is a hacky brush. Hockey, actually, they call it hockey brush. And do the same thing, just soften this whole thing up a little bit. And all I'm doing is just softly, very softly, going over this, just to feather this out a little bit more, to create that sandy illusion. Alright, just a little bit. So now we have this almost complete, I mean, there are going to be little small things that I'm going to put in here, but I don't want to make this complicated with putting a lot of debris in here. I just want to create the solution of going out in space. What we need to do now is to determine some dark areas back here on the horizon. So what I'm doing is I'm going to mix a little bit of my cerulean blue for horizon with lavender. And we're going to create a green, but we're going to create a soft green. And then a little bit of yellow ochre in there. I'll show you what I mean by soft green. It's almost a gray green. Okay. So some of this area here is our horizon area and water tower. A little bit of a gray green, maybe a little bit more yellow ochre in this, a little bit more lavender in it. Let's get a, okay, it's almost a brown green in effect. And it looks like to me what ends up happening is, as I see this, we have this going ahead, just in front of that area, and in front of the tower actually. Yeah. All right, we'll just put it down there. We'll just that's going back there, and it looks like all of this stuff here is doing the same thing. What we want to do is create a variety, though, of greens. We don't want it to be boring, so I'm going to take a little bit more yellow ochre and add it to just my cerulean blue. See if I can green this up a little bit. Take my cerulean blue, turn it into more of a greenish color. And just do the same thing. Now this is damp now, okay? So what we're doing is we're just going to start to put in. Actually, it looks like it's even drier. Dried out a little bit. Let's get it a little bit wetter. Okay, so we come and see this green over here. It's a little bit different than the stuff I've got in this area here. Okay, and the same thing's going to happen. We'll wet it. This is what happened. Basically, this is damp. I'm using more pigment in this paper right now, more pigment than water, into this area which is almost damp or dry. It's pretty dry at this point, to create the solution. And what I want to do too as well is soften it a bit. And now this is just water that I'm applying to certain areas so that it gives you a softer look. Some of it's going to be harder look, some of it's going to be a softer look, all right? And you don't have to be, it doesn't have to be controlled to the point where it looks, it's exactly the same. But what I want to do is I do want to create the illusion, if nothing else, the illusion of beach buildings, stuff going on back here. A little darker down here. So we're going to create a shoreline, and we want that shoreline to be interesting, and we want it to be a focal point, but we don't want it to be really super dark. I don't want it to be super dark, because it's softly sitting there in the background. So what I'm doing is just creating. I'm using my same mixture I have here. I'm using a little bit of Pyro Red, a little bit of alizarin crimson. I'm sorry, a little bit of Pyro Red, a little bit of yellow ochre, my cerulean blue, and the only thing else I added was a little lavender to create some of this. And these are arbitrary spots to indicate stuff going on back there. I'm not trying to. God, I don't think I would want to try to build each one of these little homes that are out there and buildings and so forth. But all we really want to do is create the illusion, characteristically, that there's activity. There's buildings that are out here that are very interesting, and we want to make sure that we give you that feeling. Okay, so some of them are going to be varying in terms of value and color. We could leave this here. That actually looks like a big sand dune. That might be cool. I know it doesn't exist out there, but it might be nice to sort of take a look at that as a possibility. And we have this. I'm going to do it this way so I don't put my fingers in it. But we have this tower. Now I'm going to move this tower. Actually, I think I want to move it over because it's a little bit too close to the center. Not quite centered. But maybe what I'm going to do is create the tower here. Now here, this might be a problem now because it's a little bit. It's already dry. We may just put two towers out there. I don't know. No, we might have to. This is a planning situation here. We have to know what we're going to be doing beforehand, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that. I'm going to probably have to make that into something else that I just put down there. But essentially, if I take a look at this is my tower right here. There you go. We'll let that ghost back there. But the other one that I just put in, we'll make it into something else. And we also have this water tower. It's going to be sitting here, and we'll make this into a, I don't know. Let's just make it into a building. How's that? Put some buildings high up here. We have to fudge this a bit. All right, so it looks like we've got some structure back there that we're looking at. And we've got some real dark. Now I'm going to go to my cobalt blue, and I'm going to come in here with a nice dark to light. Okay, and I'm going to bring that right across. But I'm going to change it up a bit, a little bit cobalt, So, whoa, just adding, I'm going to add a little bit of a cooler tone back there too. We'll gray this down a bit, adding a little bit of opera in with this. So, and again, we're looking at what's going on back there. We're looking at that being, we need something back there, but we don't want it to be, and we want it to be interesting, but we don't want it to be controlling where we look. Just a small portion. I'm going to build this up right here, this area. But the rest of it I don't want to be okay. Alright. And let's move a little bit. Let's get a little bit, some little dark areas here. We'll soften that up a bit. A few dark spots here and there. And this is dry, by the way, or it's pretty workable right now, so we can actually go in here and lay some tone back there so that it works a little bit better. So what we're starting to do is to create some interest back there. Now what I want to do is do this. I want this area back here, I want this sort of to be a little bit darker. So I'm going to come in here with a large brush and just go right over that whole thing. Okay. And what I'm going to do is do the same thing with a nice little dark area right here. And so what we're seeing is a lot of sand. There you go. Darken that up a bit. Okay. Just soften that up a bit. I'm going to make actually everything back here a little bit even darker too. But I want to create this illusion, this of sand with debris on the beach. Touching it very lightly. What I'm doing is I've got a mixture of the mixture that I used out here of a little bit of opera with my into my cerulean blue and cobalt blue, so it gets to be a little bit cooler, and we're just putting out some just basically some little shapes here and there to indicate that there's just a bit of debris on the or footsteps or whatever. Some of it's going to be a little bit darker. Of course, the farther out you get, the less you're going to see. All right, we just want to create this sort of illusion. All right. But this is all just very softly done. cooler areas. Still a little bit on the dark side here, in the wet side, rather. Adding just a bit of warmth to it by bringing in some burnt sienna into this. I want to create a little bit of a darker area here on the tower. And that should be pretty straight too. So what I'll do is when that dries, I'll straighten it out. Can't straighten it out, but that's a characteristic of that. And creating a little bit of, that should be round, by the way. So in order to get it round, I'm just going to soften that up a little bit as it comes down. Okay, so we got to let it dry before I put my little people in and so forth, and get some of this stuff back here a little darker. We also may want to make this a little greener. So I'm mixing up a green, combining cerulean blue, cobalt blue, and Nuki and Bauge. I don't want it necessarily everywhere. And dark enough so that there's some interest here and there. This, it's off, it's not dead center, but a little bit too close to the center for me. However, I'm not going to be able to do too much about that. I'll have to fix that in a little while. Taking just a bit of my Naples yellow, and I'm putting it in here and there. Suggest brightness back there, some of it. Okay. A few things here and there. Maybe even, let's just take a drop of sandy color, but brighter sandy color. So we'll mix this up. What I'm doing is I'm just putting in a few things that are a little bit stronger. Value-wise, pigment. This is lavender. And again, we're just indicating buildings, lights, darks. We want it strong enough so that you pay attention to it, but I don't want it overbearing. I don't want to make it so that it's just so bad, so heavy, except for one small area. And that is right in this area here. Okay. So let's take a look at, let's see how that works out. We're going to have to let it set for a while because I need to put in some figures back here. We want people walking on the beach. But at least what I'm seeing here is movement going from the foreground back here to this area. We may pull up a little bit of water here and there. We may want to make this a little bit. Some lighter area right there, a little bit lighter. Also, we may want to do the same thing with something over here. Okay. There's sunlight over there, guys. Just need to pull it out. So I'm going to get some clean water right now, and I will be right back with you. Okay, now this is all still wet. I got some clean water, and I got clean water because what I'm doing is I want to pull out some lighter values here and there. And I want a nice light value in here as well. I may scrape a highlight or two in there, we'll see. So this stuff over here tends to look a little bit like buildings, homes. We may need a little bit of, more of a separation in terms of darks and lights that we can put in there. What I'm doing is I'm just putting some more little darker areas in here, using a little bit of my brown and my green and my blue mixed up together. Okay. Just wanted a touch of darkness and touch more dark in that area back there. And I also want a touch more dark in some of the water. So we're strengthening my blue right in this area back here. Okay. And we need to actually make more of a definition on this water. This is water here. So let's go back and put that in. I'm using cerulean blue to do that. And I'm trying to keep my lines horizontal. Now I know it's not perfect, but keeping the lines horizontal helps to make sure that that there's not a lot of action in the water. We're just seeing this. It's not a lot of waves and things like that. Okay. So now we're going to just let it dry, and I'm going to put some figures in. Just what I'm doing now is just taking a little bit of lavender and just softly going over this like a glaze. Just want to touch this up a little bit here. Okay, so let's get our figures in, and the way we're going to end up having to do our figures is we have to do them dark to light. So I mean, dark against light, light against dark. So if I have a figure, for instance, in this area here, then we're going to end up, let's do a, whoop, too wet, still too wet. Tell you what, let me use my rigger to do this with. We want to get this we don't want it as wet. A little head. A little body. And little feet, I guess. Little head there. Little head there. A few more. Let's do this. And how about maybe another one? Couple back here, a little darkers. You don't want that to spread. Unfortunately, that's what's happening right now. It's still a little bit on the wet side. Okay. Let's get another little bit of a softer, overall softer feel out here, warmer. And a little bit of warmer down here. All right, that's going to be it, pretty much. That's all the lesson is. It's just a matter of working with the illusion of people that are out there on the water. I'm going to have to, because I put in, I didn't leave enough white on this, I'm going to end up probably putting a little bit of white paint in that area to help it along a little bit. I don't know if I can do this with my white pencil. Let's see. No, it won't work with that. Now here's what I mean by picking up and scraping is I'm taking a little bit of water. I've got a oil brush here with a hard bristle. And what I'm doing is I'm coming in here and I'm going to lift out some of this. All right, but now what I'm actually really doing here is I'm scraping the paper. I have a soft fibered paper. You guys that are using ashes, you're not going to run into, you won't have that problem. You'll be able to get it without destroying the integrity of the paper. But this paper is Strathmore. It's got a softer fiber to it. And in order for me to get back some of that light with this, I have to go in and do something like that. I want to get a nice light area back here too. I want some of this to be more vibrant. And again, you see what happens, how it's peeling up? I don't know if you can see that, but the paper is actually peeling off the surface. My shoreline. These are small things that I'm just sort of doing to try to create a little bit more interest. It doesn't seem to I have any shoreline over here anymore. So I'm just going to put some back in. Okay, and the only other thing I'm going to do here is see if I can straighten this out a little bit more. because this tower actually is not, doesn't come down at an angle. Well, that meant what I did is I lifted up pay attention, guys. What I actually did is I lifted up that paint. What paint? My cerulean blue, my very light cerulean blue. I don't know if that's going to cover it, but we'll see. Tell you what we'll do. We'll help this along by giving it a little bit of a different interest in the sky. There you go. We'll soften a lot of this stuff back here. A little bit of clouds, how's that? Always a way around this stuff when you make mistakes. Okay, enough. As I continue to work, right? Enough. A little bit of a drag line here and there. And white. I have to get some white. Okay, so now what I'm doing is I've got some white paint. This is permanent white. It's a designer color. Gouache. And I'm just finding ways to put this thing, some of this back. Create little white areas back here. Perfectly legitimate, except for the, in terms of painting watercolors. I should have left this alone, but I didn't, so it's just a way back. And this little tower here, this little water tower, has a white cap on it there, maybe something here. All right, close enough. I can go, I'm overdoing it. Now I'm overdoing it. Let's get this little guy, probably has a shirt on right here, white shirt. And we have one that's over here that's all right. So that's it for now. That'll give you an idea as to how to just create the illusion of going back in space. Light area here. This is a darker, a little lighter, a little darker, much darker. Back here, but not overpowering. Still set in the background. So thank you. Appreciate you being with me, and hopefully we get something out of this. Have a good day. Take care.